One sticking point so many guitar players encounter is this. They get comfortable with the pentatonic, but when it comes to any other scales or modes, it feels like starting all over again. But we can overcome this quite easily by simply taking what we already know and adding one or two extra notes. So I'm about to show you the essential notes you can and should be adding to your pentatonic solos to give you Dorian mode, Mixolydian mode, the full major and minor scales, the blues scale, everything basically. So take a listen to the track we'll be working with. It's got 3 distinct sections, all requiring a slightly different approach to note choices. So to start, let's just remind ourselves of the first position E minor pentatonic scale that we'll be using in this video. Now I'm sure most of us know this position really well already, so let's crack on, and the first note we can add into this to take it up a level is here, 14th fret on the high E string, an F sharp, which is the 9th in the context of E minor. But how do we know we can add this note in? Well, let's just look at the chords I was playing over in the first part of my solo there. E minor, to C, to D, to G. Now all of these chords naturally occur within the key of E minor, and we can see from this D chord here, we've got an F sharp on the top of the chord at the 2nd fret on the high E there. So all we're doing is taking this note and bringing it up an octave to the 14th fret and adding it in to our pentatonic shape. Now a couple of great ways we can use this note is firstly, bending it up to hit the G at the fret above. Really nice, really melodic, immediately taking us into a different dimension from just using purely the pentatonic. And then also any kind of hammer-ons and pull-offs using these 3 notes, 15, 14 and 12 on the high E there. Great for some speedier runs. I think I did something much more simple in my solo. But nonetheless, great for adding in a scale run, giving us a new kind of dimension. Throughout this video, I'll focus on where these notes are on the upper strings, just to keep it simple, but I would add there is another F sharp here, 11th fret on the G string, and I think I used that one with a little bend up as a resolution later on in the solo. So now with that F sharp added in, our 5-note pentatonic scale becomes a 6-note hexatonic scale, and one more note gets us to the full 7-note minor scale, and that note's going to be here, 13th fret on the B string, which is a C. Now of course our chords, E minor to C, to D, to G, of course we can add in this C note here. It's got other uses other than just being in that C chord, for example in a G chord. The C is what we use as the sus4 there, so again taking it from the 1st fret on the B string there, we can move that up an octave to the 13th. So that's how we know it belongs here. Now this one is so melodic anytime we use it in a run. So there, for example, just a hammer on and pull off at the 12th to the 13th, and then down the scale, immediately really nice sound, and then maybe play it direct, bend it up a full step to hit the D 2 frets higher, resolve down maybe, great melodic sounds, and then maybe playing at the 12th fret and half step bend up and down to go up that C. Something like that, sounds great. So now with this F sharp, 14th fret on the high E and our C, 13th fret on the B, we've turned our E minor pentatonic into the full E minor scale. So now let's move on to talk about Dorian mode. And I know modes can seem scary, but they can also be really simple, as you're about to see. So the chords in the next section are E minor to A major. This chord progression is really common, particularly in disco music, for example. But this A major doesn't technically fit within the key of E minor because it's got a note within it which is outside of the key, namely this C sharp here at the 2nd fret on the B string, which clashes against the C natural we were just working with in the E minor scale. So we just need to make a slight adjustment to make our scale pattern fit. So all we need to do is take this C sharp from our A chord, move it up an octave to the 14th fret on the B string there, and add that into our pentatonic position. So now on the B string we've got 12, 14 and 15. So notice we're playing this note here, the C sharp at the 14th, instead of the C natural at the 13th, because that no longer fits. So now we've got 12, 14 and 15 on the B, and then on the high E, 12, 14 and 15. So we're keeping this F sharp that we used before. That one we can pretty much always use. And now with this slight tweak, we've immediately got into Dorian mode, as simple as that. A great way to use this note is just like with the F sharp earlier. Half step bend to hit the note 1 fret above. Classic kind of Dorian sounds there. I think in my solo you would have seen me focusing on the F sharp over the E minor chord, and then coming down to focus on this C sharp over the A major chord to keep the solo in line with the underlying harmony. So we've been working in E minor, but in the next section the track switches up into E major. Now you might think this would cause us to need a complete different scale, but no, we're going to stay where we are and use something called the Mixodorian Blues scale. Now this sounds complicated, but we've got most of what we need already. Now this is a mashup between the mixolydian, the dorian and the blues scale. And of course we've just been using Dorian, so we've got these notes 12, 14, 15 on the B and high E strings, so that's kind of the Dorian element covered. So what about the mixolydian element? Well, the mixolydian mode is a major scale with a flat 7, so we need some way of transforming our E minor scale that we've been working with into an E major scale. But that's actually pretty simple because we know this is an E minor chord and this is an E major chord, the only difference being here on the G string, a G natural at the 12th fret in E minor versus a G sharp at the 13th fret in an E major chord. So just by adding in this G sharp to our lines, we immediately transform our scale pattern into a major tonality. Now we can also keep in the G natural and use it as a kind of slide up to the G sharp, because this movement from minor to major is really a key part of the blues sound. And as soon as you hear me play something like, you get that blues flavour coming in. So now we've got 3 notes on top of our usual pentatonic pattern. Firstly, F sharp, which we can pretty much always add in. Secondly, C sharp, which brings in the Dorian flavour. And then thirdly, G sharp, which brings in the mixolydian flavour. So now we've got the Mixodorian part of this Mixodorian blues scale covered. Then the blues element, well, we've already got this movement here, which we've discussed is key for the blues, but there's one more note we can add, which is here at the 15th fret on the G string, a B flat, which is the blue note in the key of E minor, which gives us that kind of sound. So one more note we can add there, which gives us the full Mixodorian blues scale experience. sometimes call this the blues chord scale, and I'll link below a video going into much more depth about how to use this, but let's just pick out a few things from my solo there just to bring this to life a bit. Firstly, 14 and 14 on the G and B strings, down to 12 and 12 with a hammer on, to 13 just on the G string, and then maybe resolve down to 14 on the D string. You saw me using a bit of that, very bright kind of majory sounding, but also bluesy. There may be something a lot more bluesy. That lick there I really like to use, so big full step bend at the 15th on the high E, and then little bend, the 14th there, and then resolving down to the 12th, the E note there. Something like that, really nice kind of darker bluesy sounding lick. But then for something even more darker sounding, let's use this blue note, you know, kind of any run down starting on that one at the 15th on the G string, 15, 14, 12, and then down to 14 on the D. You can repeat around that and get a much darker blues sound. So with this Mixodorian Blues scale, you've got it all at your fingertips in terms of the brighter majory sounds with those really dark blues sounds as well.